You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
My name is David Ian Howe, and I'm an anthropologist and archaeologist. If you don't already know me, I have an Instagram account called Ethnocynology, which is ethno meaning people and cyno meaning dog. I believe that's Greek. Ethnocynology itself is the study of dogs in human cultural contexts. I am starting a new podcast called Ethnocynology, where I get to dive deep into these different topics, having to do with dogs in archaeology, dog genetics, dogs in popular media, and maybe get into some different issues like the dingo or wolf conservation and things like that, wolf behavior. I'd hope to get some experts on to talk about, different things, especially regarding genetics, because that goes way over my head half the time, maybe 3/4 of the time, maybe even 80% of the time. And I'm assuming if it's going over my head, it might be going over some of your heads. So I'd like to get some people on here to discuss it with me or just talk about it myself. And because ethnocynology is a study of dogs in human cultural context, besides the archaeology, including, burials or excavations having to do with dogs or different dog remains that are found at sites, whether they were consumed or sacrificed or just buried by themselves, that's the archaeology aspect. But for the other aspects of it, we could explore dogs in indigenous culture, dogs in different remote cultures around the world, like sheep herders or reindeer herders who use dogs. So we could talk about the border collie and how it's essentially an effective machine and computer that is completely programmed to, scare and corral sheep, exploiting their natural aversion to predators because they don't really realize the difference between a wolf and a dog. I'm sure they do now after thousands of years of having dogs, but the spirit of it is still there. Another thing I would love to talk about is dogs in popular media. Obviously, the direwolves in Game of Thrones is a pretty heavy theme in the books. The show kind of did away with it for CGI reasons, but I understand. There's also I Am Legend, the post-apocalyptic movie where there's no humans left on Earth but Will Smith. And how do you talk? How does Will Smith talk to the audience in that movie? Well, the effective way to do that is to give him a dog, because it's not human. So he can still be the last human on Earth, but he has someone to talk to, and that is something that we're familiar with, and we understand how people talk to dogs. They don't really talk back per se. They can with barks and whines, but he can just talk to the dog, and it's not that he's just talking to himself. Anyway, I'm digressing. I really like that movie, but it's something that we could talk about because that is still dog anthropology. But lastly, another thing I would love to do with this podcast is either start the podcast with this or end it with this. Just do it sometimes, maybe its own episode, talking about a recent article that came out and kind of breaking that science down, because dog articles and new dog studies come out constantly, and they get shared all over the New York Times and CNN and Fox and all these things. And their actual meaning, the scientific accuracy of it, kind of gets blurred based on clicks and headlines. So I'd like to dive into those and explain them for the audiences. Because, again, a lot of stuff does go over my head, so I imagine it probably goes over yours. And I would like to be the person that's able to translate that to you, or, have an expert on to discuss it. So anyway, this is the Ethnocynology podcast with David Ian Howe. You can find the show on my YouTube, the video version that will have graphics and things like that to help you follow along. But also it will be syndicated and produced by the Archaeology Podcast Network, which is one of the best archaeology podcast networks there is, because it's the only one. On the APN, I used to do a podcast with my colleagues Carlton Gover and Connor Johnen called A Life in Ruins. And of the many great things about the APN, you're able to go through and check those episodes in the backlog, even if we're not producing new episodes right now, if you want to go back and listen to some of those. But you can find my podcast on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and all the places you can normally find podcasts. And again, the visual component will be here on YouTube. So I'm happy to have you subscribe here. Please subscribe to the APN and also subscribe to my podcast on the APN or on whatever your preferred podcast platform is. So, and I forgot to mention, I will be talking to you about this stuff every 2 weeks, releasing on Saturdays. So thank you very much. I hope you stay around. Please subscribe. Please download the podcast and subscribe to the podcast on the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thank you.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.